All right, we are live.
Okay, awesome, wonderful.
Awesome. Okay, everybody. So, welcome to Reclaim Your Radiance,
Hi,
episode
everybody.
5. So, my question for you tonight, dear viewers, is it time to cut ties with alcohol? Have you ever asked yourself if maybe your drinking isn't healthy and wondered if you should take a step back for a while? If this sounds like you, stay tuned tonight because I have a very special guest for you this evening, Michelle B., also known as Sober Virgo Woman, that can be hard to say. She will be joining us tonight to talk all things alcohol and how to break up or back away from this ubiquitous beverage. So, welcome to Reclaim Your Radiance with Melanie Starr. This is your source for inspiration, motivation, and wisdom on your path to wellness, vitality, and growth. This is the place where together we will learn how to recognize, understand, and release old patterns in our bodies and minds that are keeping us stuck. This includes emotional and behavioral patterns that wreak havoc on our health, like drinking. If you don't know me, my name is Melanie Starr, and I'm a life coach, master EFT practitioner, Reiki master, and yoga teacher with more than 20 years of experience in the health and wellness field. I'm the creator of the Holistic Divorce Healing Method, a lifelong and passionate learner of holistic approaches to healing trauma, and the host of this show. Please join me and my guests every week for a breath of fresh air, some new perspectives, healing techniques, and resources that you can use to shift your energy and reclaim your radiance. Because this is where, together, we're going to learn how to use our bodies, breath, mind, and voices to shift our energy out of stagnation, contraction, and fear into freshness, expansion, and love. In today's episode, I am thrilled to welcome my guest, Michelle B., also known as Sober Virgo Woman. She's a sobriety coach just outside New York City who offers online coaching services across North America and around the world. I met Michelle last September through a small business networking platform called Alignable. I'm the co-leader of the health and wellness coaching industry group on Alignable and was delighted to meet Michelle at an event I was hosting. We got to talking after that, and not much later, I hosted Michelle and 3 other sobriety and recovery coaches in a Sober October panel discussion. We've stayed in touch ever since, and I'm delighted that she could join us tonight as we reach the end of Dry January 2024. Hi, Michelle, and welcome.
Hi, how are you? It's so nice to see you.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you could join us tonight. So
I
very
know,
fun.
me too, me too. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's this is my first time hosting a guest on my show, so
Okay,
I'm really glad it's you. I think this is a great topic, and I'm really glad that you could join us tonight.
awesome.
So yeah, and given that it's near the end of January, January 30th,
Mhm.
um, just wanted to, and before we dive into maybe a more personal conversation, just ask you what your take is as to, why is dry January important? Like sober October, same thing. Why are these, sort of designated dry months, sober dry months important?
Okay, awesome. So, just for those of you that don't know, dry January or sober October is where you decide that you're taking a break from alcohol. You just kind of want to see where it's going to take you. You're kind of taking a break and seeing what life is like when you don't have alcohol. And maybe you want to see what the fuss is about. Or you just want some support from some other communities or from other people. And instead of beating yourselves up to stop drinking, you're trying to start and not beating yourself up so much. And health and wellness, right? Who doesn't want to be better, live longer, learn better techniques in life? So that's part of the reason why dry January, I think, is so important.
Awesome. So, pardon me, I've got a little frog in my throat. So I've been noticing, like, I just can't help but notice, like, in the past year, that I'm just seeing apps on my phone. I'm seeing books all around the internet, programs, coaching programs, challenges, events. And then there's like this ever expanding range of non-alcoholic beverages at the grocery store and on the restaurant menus, zero proof cocktails. It's like there appears to be, to the observer, a social revolution almost, and even a movement for sobriety inside in sorry, like a movement for sobriety. Why do you think this is happening now?
Well, I definitely love that it's happening right now. I never thought I would say that in my entire life,
Right.
ever. Um, I love it. And it started, so Ruby Warrington, she coined Sober Curious, and it started in the UK actually around 2017, 2018, and it's slowly come over to the America, and it's kind of upticked since then. And I think a big part of it kind of goes back to health and wellness, right? We're trying
Yeah,
to be more aware of what we're putting in our body, what we are, how we're interacting with our relationships and our friendships and our life in general.
right.
I think it's also part of trying something different, right? Some of us have been drinking for 20 something years or 10 years. So this is something that's a little bit different. So here I have an example. So I have Curious Elixir, which is one of my favorite mocktails, and I have it in a nice wine glass, right? So if you didn't know, you might be think I'm drinking alcohol, and I just still like to be like fabulous and fun, and it's just like the whole fancy part of it. It's just this whole like thing going on right here. And I think that that is also why, right? People want to still feel that way and still be accepted, and because that's what we want as human beings.
It's true.
And the research, I think the other thing is that the research is coming out how bad alcohol, well, how alcohol is affecting our bodies, what it's
Yep.
doing to us.
Yep.
And I think that the more and more research that comes out, the more and more quit lit that comes out. This is a current book I'm reading, How to Eat to Change How You Drink,
Oh, nice.
by Dr. Brooke Scheller. So, a lot of these books are coming out too. And I think that that's another reason why people are curious, like, hey, what's going on? Should I jump on this trend? Why is this happening?
Yeah, I think the big thing that really opened my eyes was hearing the Huberman Lab podcast
Yes,
when he was talking about, Dr. Huberman was talking about a study that had recently come out where they were looking at like a relatively low moderate intake to see what the effect of that was, like 1 or 2 drinks a week, but weekly. It's like the
correct.
chronicity, like chronic, but not high, like just what really a common drinking pattern. And in fact, in Canada, there are new guidelines. Our guidelines in Canada now are no more than 2 drinks a week, compared to they used to be like no more than 7 for women and no more than 14 for men. I think it's still that in the States, but in Canada, they've really brought it down. But even that recommended guideline maximum, according to this study that Huberman was talking about, you still are getting negative effects on the neocortex is the
Yes,
big one for me. That was just like a real eye opener. Like, oh, your brain is actually thinning and shrinking if you are drinking even at this moderate level. And then there's, the microbiome damage, the sleep impact, all of these kinds of things. Not that not that you can't get like it's a big improvement, right? To go
right,
from say
absolutely.
7 or 10 a week to 2 would be like that's a big win if that's what someone's able to do, right? But I was really surprised to hear that low of a level would have that much of an impact. That really kind of was like that encouraged me to get into Sober October last fall, right? And
Yeah, it's a big eye
yeah,
opener, right? Because you
it
don't
is.
think of that. Alcohol is the biggest drug that's accepted and pushed in society.
Yeah,
And I think that we don't realize the effects of it besides that hangover. But what do you think that
yeah.
hangover is? We don't
Right.
realize
You've just
that
been poisoned.
alcohol, yeah,
Yeah,
alcohol is poisoning our body. And
yeah,
again, I didn't know that either until I did some research. And
yeah.
the more I found out what it was doing to us, it's affecting so much of your
Yeah.
body.
That's right. And that was what also really struck me was his the insight that where it's both water soluble and fat soluble, so it can just slip right through a cell membrane like nobody's business. And unlike other drugs that have like a molecule that attaches to the receptor on the surface of a cell, like say THC on a cannabinoid receptor, or an opioid on an opioid receptor, or any other drug on their receptor, alcohol just waltzes right on in. It doesn't attach to a receptor on the surface. It goes right into the cell and starts damaging the DNA and the organelles in the
Hmm.
cell.
Oh
So
yeah.
it was like, oh, wow. And then it's indiscriminate and it crosses the blood-brain barrier just like a walk in the park, right? It's just like, oh, hey, we're here and we're going to mess up your gray matter and your white matter while we're
Yes. And I
here.
think that's
Yeah.
the Yeah, I think that's a big part of this is that we don't realize the effect that it is having on our body because it's fun and it's everybody's doing it and it's just something that we should do together and like let's go have a drink,
Yeah,
it's
let's
kind
go
of
have a
like
drink. It's like what
yeah,
everyone said, let's go have a drink. Not only that, but I mean, I've always been really health conscious, right? Like for decades and trying to eat the perfect diet. I was, like a really disciplined person, yoga every day, didn't eat sugar or wheat for 20 years pretty much. But I was drinking red wine, thinking,
yep,
all the publicity about how healthy red wine is for you, those, antioxidants and flavonoids, resveratrol, and it's like, oh, well, this is a health beverage. This is awesome. This is
right.
part of my healthy diet. But no, not that I was drinking a lot of it, but certainly, to the current guidelines and probably exceeding the current guidelines and thinking that it was just fine and dandy because I was
Yeah,
not
and
drinking
I
it.
never looked at the guidelines nor cared about the guidelines. It was just
Right,
something that I wanted to do and I didn't care about any of those things at that time.
right.
And I will say, as far as the sober movement goes, I think it's important for people to also know that the Mindful Drinking Fest just happened in
Yes.
Washington, D.C., and that is a big deal right there. So that's the first drinking the non-alcoholic event that's happened, as far as I know, in the country in the United States that's happened ever. So
Wow.
there's non-alcoholic events all the time, but this sounds like it was the first biggest one, and it was authors and it was podcast hosts and non-alcoholic drink companies, and they all got together and had like one big party, and I'm so jealous I didn't get to go. I had some
I
other things
bet.
going on, but I cannot wait to go next year.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
I've noticed that here in Canada that oh, that's the other big thing, of course, too, is the cancer risk. That low level of drinking still, even at that 2 drinks a week for women, increases risk of breast cancer by 15%. So that's like, whoa, really? Wow, 15%. That's a pretty big increase. So the Canadian Cancer Society is doing a dry February as a
Yes, yes.
fundraiser. Yeah, as a fundraiser. I don't know if anything like that's happening in the States, but that's happening here. So that's kind of cool too, because it's like, okay, January's over. Now what? A lot of people will just go back to the regular same old, but some
Right.
people will want to either like really try to maintain, like ease back into it at a much lower level, or try to maintain, like, here's another thing. You can do a dry January, dry February now too, and raise some money for
Right.
cancer research. So
And
that's
I
kind of
think
cool.
just trying a little bit at a time, right? So
Yeah.
how did you feel, right? In a current study, so I had done some research. So in the 1980s, alcohol, the warning was it increases risk of breast cancer and stroke. In 1992, it was wine is good for the heart.
Right.
In 2015, there was the risk of cancer, the increased risk of cancer. And as of 2018, no amount of alcohol is good for the overall health.
Right. Yeah. There's no safe amount. Yeah.
Not at
Yeah.
all. And
Right.
oh man, I'm glad that I'm sober now, but I never thought that I would get that way by any means. And if you told me a couple years ago, or well, over 3 years, that I would be having this conversation with you,
No.
not at all.
Not at
Not at
all.
all.
Not
It
at
would be
all.
like a big joke. And now I'm just loving every second of it.
That's amazing. So how did you get started on this journey?
I think it was just I was making a lot of mistakes with my friendships, with my relationships, with my own life. I was in college and starting a new career. I had gone to college a little bit later in life, so in my early 30s. So while I was going to school to be an educator, I would be hungover all the time. I just wasn't performing
Uh,
at my best. And
right.
I was working, I had worked so hard. I wanted to be a teacher since I was in second grade. And I just was sick and tired of feeling sick and tired.
Right.
And not being my best and not realizing that the fights that my husband, but he was my boyfriend at the time, now realizing that the majority of our fights were about alcohol. right?
Oh, okay. About
And the
alcohol.
stupid things, right? And the stupid
Okay.
things that I was doing, right? I had done them all throughout my, late teens and early 20s. But it was just like, okay, listen, like you're in college, you're starting your career, you need to get your shit together.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
really
Okay.
that was the biggest part of it, was just I needed to figure out how I could change. And every time I tried to stop drinking, I couldn't go more than like 5 or 6 days.
So what was the breakthrough for you that got you through that? Like running into that pattern of I can go for 5 days, but then I'm back off the wagon. I fell off the wagon.
Yeah, finding the community, I think, was the thing. Like I tried AA and I tried podcasts, and AA, I really resonated with the stories. That was
Hmm.
something that I really resonated with. But the community with A Sober Girl's Guide with Recovery Elevator,
Okay.
the two podcasts that I really listened to, were very helpful because I was hearing other people's stories and learning to
Right.
know that I was not alone.
Not alone. And then also, if that person can do it, then how come I can't?
Right. And I
Yeah.
I listened to them for quite a while. It took me a long time to finally get, and I tell my clients, and I do the same thing myself. So instead of tools in my toolbox, I say jewels in my jewelry box. And over the time, I put more jewels in my jewelry box. So
Right.
podcast was one thing that was really
Right.
helpful, and knowing that there were sober communities out there and that I wasn't alone was the biggest thing that really opened my eyes. And one of the reasons why I became a sobriety coach was because as a woman, I felt so alone for 8 years. I didn't resonate
Right.
with AA. There wasn't much of anything that I found at that time that resonated. And now I'm just like yelling from the rooftops about how many communities there are and how many wonderful, how great life is now.
So
And
yeah,
I
so
always, oops, sorry, go ahead.
oh, no problem. I was just going to actually say, so like I had two kind of questions that are kind of similar, like, because you're having such a great time now. So how has your life changed since becoming sober? We'll start with that one.
I would say I'm clear headed, right?
Clear-headed.
Wake
That's
up.
nice.
Yeah.
Handy.
And that's also a really good podcast, Clear Headed.
Right.
Um,
Clear-headed. Oh,
no
there's a
hangovers.
podcast called Clear-headed.
There is. Kate
Okay.
Madry is
Okay.
I know she's doing a little rebranding, but I'm pretty sure it's still going to be called Clear Headed.
Okay.
Um, and no hangovers. Just like that
Right.
alone,
Right.
I didn't realize how often I was waking up being hungover until I stopped drinking.
Right. Right.
um Being able to accomplish life goals that I never thought possible, such as like running a half marathon. I've always been very active. I've always done hot yoga. I've always done running. And I always said, I'll do a marathon. I'll do a marathon. I'll do a marathon. But then when I stopped drinking, I found a community called Recovery Elevator, and they're amazing. And they were doing a group for a half marathon in Colorado. And I live in
Nice.
New York, and there was no question that I was doing this half marathon. And it was such a big deal for me because everybody would be like, why don't you just do one like right up the street or, an hour away? And I was like, because I always wanted to go to Colorado. And
Right. And make
and
it such a big reward and such a big, like, wowzers experience, right? Yeah.
and it was every single thing that I thought it was. And I trained in 3 months, and I did not come in dead last. I was definitely in the last part of it, last 100 people, but I don't care. I did it.
Right. You did
And
it.
like for me, it
Yeah.
was such a huge, huge, huge accomplishment. And not realizing that I had that potential, that I
Yeah.
had that power to do those things
Right.
is just that
Right.
right there is so huge,
Right.
huge.
So yeah, so and what are some of the biggest things that you've learned going through this? And how long did it take you to get from like whatever you were drinking that you were feeling like yucky about to being like not drinking at all, not even wanting to? Like what
Um,
did you learn along that
well,
way? Like,
I did not have the resources then. So like 8 years, I struggled back and
right,
forth, where
gotcha.
I would take a break for maybe a week and then I would go back to it. and then I would be fine for a while, and then something crappy would happen, and then I would like rethink my relationship, and then maybe try a sober October or try dry January. Um, and then in the beginning of 2020, I think this was the biggest thing for me. So in the beginning of 2020, I'd found a sober community that really resonated with me, that I
Gotcha.
really liked a lot. And
Gotcha.
a combination of that and dry January, and just now having more jewels in my jewelry box. Like I started learning that
Right.
there was non-alcoholic beverages, like
Yeah.
there was Recess and Curious Elixir, and even if those weren't there then, there was Mingle, an athletic brewing company. So Mingle was like a very delicious sparkly non-alcoholic beverage that you could put in a wine glass and still
Yeah.
have the same experience without the bad side effects.
Right.
And then that was a big part of it. So podcasts and mocktails were a huge part. And then we, right in the beginning of the pandemic, there was a trauma in my family.
Okay.
And I started drinking very, very heavily due to that, and the pandemic.
Right. Everyone, a lot of people, the pandemic really, I think that's part of why we have this movement right now, too, is people are going, holy
Yes.
cow, like that got out of hand. I got to get back on track.
Yes, and I want to go back
Yeah.
to that just really quick, because that is absolutely a great point as well with the pandemic. A lot
Yeah.
of people either said, "Oh my gosh, I'm drinking way too much," or started drinking too much and
Started
said,
drinking
like,
too much. Yeah.
right, right.
Yeah.
I mean, there was, you could not only get food delivered to your house, but you could get a margarita in a quart container delivered to your house.
Right. Right. And also, I mean, people probably didn't really realize what they were doing if they were just having one or two drinks a day. It's like, well, they're not getting drunk at any point in time, but they're just drinking every day. And that makes you addicted.
Well,
That's
and
what happens with
also
alcohol. It's addictive. It's addictive. If you drink it 7 days in a row, you're addicted.
And
So,
also, what people were doing is, let's say, maybe before the pandemic, prior to the pandemic, they may have been drinking at 4 or 5 at night. Well,
right,
now it's like 3 o'clock. Oh,
right,
now it's 1 o'clock, so
right.
your schedule's very off.
Yep.
So
Everyone
these
was
things,
dysregulated, so they started using alcohol to regulate their nervous system.
yeah,
So, yeah,
right,
yeah,
exactly. Because we
yeah,
didn't know where life was going. And
yeah. Very
a lot of
disturbing.
things, right.
Yeah,
So after the trauma,
stressful.
and I started drinking pretty heavily, I got a therapist, and I just kind of started talking to her, and she would say to me, "Why do you drink alcohol? Or why do you drink?" Right? And I would say, because it's cloudy, because it's rainy, because you have a black shirt on, because I didn't need a reason to
You don't need a
drink.
reason. The wind is blowing from the west. The wind is blowing from the
Right,
east. It's sunny. It's
right.
cloudy. It's it's hot. It's cold. Any of those
Yes,
will do,
yes,
right?
yes.
I'm happy. I'm sad.
You got it. All of
Any
those.
of those things.
Yes,
Right, right.
absolutely. And
So
once
what?
I was able to identify why I was drinking, which was because of anxiety and some family stuff that I had going on and whatever, I was able to identify that. And that's
Right,
really where the weight had lifted off my shoulders.
right,
And, I'd worked with my therapist, and it was a combination of mocktails and podcasts. And I wasn't going to rehab or any of that. I didn't hit a quote unquote rock bottom.
no
It
rock
was just
bottom
something.
required.
No,
Right.
no,
Yeah.
no, no rock bottom required at all.
No,
Not
it's a
at
terrible
all.
idea. It's a terrible idea to think that you need to go all the way down before you're going to change anything.
Right, right,
Because things can get awfully bad and your health can take a really big hit.
right.
Um,
Absolutely. So the
yeah,
biggest things I would say that I've learned on my journey is time, taking back my power, and
right,
money. Like those
right,
three things right there. I would come home from work and I would be like, "Oh, I'm just going to have a drink before dinner." And then I'm having a drink with dinner. And then I'm having a drink after dinner. And then what am I doing for the rest of the night?
right,
Nothing.
right,
Right?
nothing.
I'm not cleaning the house. I'm not doing the dishes. I'm not doing my laundry. I'm not straightening the house. Like, I'm just going to drink and sit on the couch and hang out and play on my phone or watch Netflix or whatever. Like, I was not productive.
Right,
And I didn't realize that until I
right.
stopped doing it. And I was like, oh, it's only 5:30. Like,
Gosh.
I still have like 3.5 hours before I have to go to bed.
Yeah,
So
I can
that
do all kinds of things. Yeah, yeah,
and I think time too, that you don't realize that you're thinking about drinking. right?
Oh,
What
yeah.
am I drinking tonight? Where am I going? Who's driving? How am I doing this? How am I doing that?
Right.
Um,
Right.
and that is like, it's those neural pathways, right? Like we were
Right.
discussing, right?
Yes.
Your brain is so used to doing the same thing every day, all day.
It's a pattern. It's just pattern, pattern, pattern repeats.
Right.
They
Right.
just do. Yep.
Right. So if you're driving to work every day and all of a sudden I change the route and you have to go this way to work, your brain's going to be like, whoa, 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 what's happening? What's happening?
Right.
And that's what is in the beginning of, when you're not drinking, that's the hard part when you're trying to
Right.
navigate that. But I think,
Thinking about it and yeah,
sorry, what did you say?
thinking about it, like thinking about alcohol and kind of craving it and dealing with that.
Right. And
You
taking
mentioned
back
some,
my power was like the biggest thing I would just say is like, you are not powerless over alcohol.
right.
Like,
And that's, from all, I've never been to an AA meeting, but I've done some reading about it and I've heard people talk about it. I'm familiar with 12-step programs from all the reading I've done about codependency and just the whole, I understand, I know what the steps are. And one of the very first steps being admitting that you are powerless over alcohol
no
and
way.
surrendering to God. You can't do it on your own. And it's like, but who else? I'm a spiritual person, but I still think that the power is mine
The power
to
is
make the
yours.
choices. It's mine.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's not anybody else's power. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's not as scary as I thought. I thought sober life was going to be super boring and I was just going to play
Boring. Yep.
puzzles and
Yep.
bowl. And instead, I ran a half marathon and my boyfriend became my husband. And just like I'm clear headed and I know what I'm doing and I'm present in my
Right.
nieces and nephews' lives and I'm there and I'm present and I'm right here with you.
Right. And you're sleeping better probably too,
Oh my
right?
God, I'm
Yeah.
sleeping better without a
Yeah.
doubt. I mean, that you don't, um, yes. Yes. I
Yes, is
mean,
the short
alcohol,
answer is
there's just
yes.
so much science. It's hard. I don't want to go off track, but
Oh,
there,
I know you can go forever. Like you don't get into REM sleep and it
yeah,
just you're just like actually you're not even in a real
yeah,
sleep. You're in a sort of
yes,
semi sleep state. Yeah.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
And because alcohol is prohibiting that from happening. And
Right.
from my clients and from the community I'm in, being a sobriety coach, not only for myself, but for a Sober Girls Guide as well, is that is two things that people say that they get that is the best thing is sleep, better sleep, and no hangovers. Like
Yeah.
that alone is just so beautiful.
And a lot of money saved too. Although some of those non-alcoholic beverages aren't cheap. They're not cheap
No,
either, for
no,
sure.
but I did just go to a sober panel and I've learned that they have to take an extra process to make it as fabulous. And so
Right.
that's what the extra cost is. And
And
the
also,
people,
like, you're not drinking them to get drunk. You're not like, you're not going to swill them the way you
right.
might swill beer at a football game or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's because you're not on any kind of a mission like they used to be around here where I'm from.
It's a good
So,
point. We're not on a
yeah.
mission. I love it. I
Right.
love it.
It's just like I'm going
Just
to
like,
enjoy this beverage. It
right,
doesn't have alcohol in it, but it's delicious. And I'm just going to enjoy the beverage and the person that I'm talking to or the book
right.
I'm reading or whatever. So yeah, you can read like, yeah, there's so much more things you can do for sure. Now, a lot of people talk about, there's a bit of an argument I see in the general literature on this topic of like, is it okay to moderate? Like some people are like, oh no, you got to go cold turkey, can't have a drop and then other people are like, no, I just want to control my drinking or moderate. There's some apps, Sunnyside app, I think is a mindful drinking app where you're tracking so that you can make sure that you're not like going over a certain, whatever you're set that you've set, like your goals for how much you want to cut back for people who are trying to cut back. So, what's your view on the moderation question?
Well, I actually have a whole episode on a podcast I was on about moderation because I was sober for 2 years and 2 months. My husband and I were in Spain in the middle of the Mediterranean, and I decided to drink. And it was, I am either going to behave myself or not behave myself. And I ended up drinking, and I was actually okay. However, for 10 months, I quote unquote moderated. And I
Right.
definitely did stop drinking more. I definitely cut back, but there was two events, one in December of 2022 and then in February of 23, and I had enough. And I was like, this is not okay. And it's not
Right.
worth it to me.
Right.
So, I mean, it's everybody's personal opinion.
Yep.
But, and I remember in the beginning, people, that's what they try. Like, okay, let me just try to drink on the weekends. You can
Yeah.
try
Yeah.
it, but see if it works for you because it
Yeah.
might and it might not.
Did for me for absolutely years,
You
you
know,
know?
and
Yep.
I don't tell people whether they should or shouldn't because you have to find out on your own
Right.
without a doubt.
Yep.
But I think the biggest thing is that it does look different for each person, and some people don't have a stop button. I don't. Right? If
Right.
you ask me if I want to have a glass of prosecco, I want a bottle of prosecco. What is the point
Right.
of one glass?
What's this glass business, right? Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So maybe
Yep.
there's your answer. Can if I said to you, do you want to just have one drink? How does that make you feel inside? Do you want to like punch me in my face?
No, I'm
Or
okay with that.
does that
Yeah.
sound good? Right? For
That's what
me,
I've been doing, a moderation approach, but like a extreme moderation, if you want, that's a kind of a funny term, but like my approach, I've been doing these dry months, but or like slightly damp, where like we had pasta last Friday night, we had a friend over for dinner, and so they were having red wine, and I had a 2 ounce glass of wine.
mm-hmm.
And I
And
was
I back
absolutely
in the
fine with
day,
that. And I was fine with that. And I thought, well, that's a very mitigation of any harm there. But it was super enjoyable. I enjoyed every little sip because I really like red wine. And with like that, it was just the perfect pairing for the food.
mm-hmm.
So I was like, well, that's not going to hurt me very much, 2 ounces and just leave it at that.
Right. And that's what I think the difference is. Leave it at that. That
Yeah.
made to me 2.5 ounces back in the day, I would have been like, yeah, right. Like that's a sip. Right. So I
Right.
wasn't, I mean, I enjoyed my drink, don't get me wrong, but I would not just want 2.5 ounces. So for me,
Right.
like that would make no sense. So I would just
Right. Right.
drink the bottle and, dance on your
Right.
table or liven up the conversation or,
Right. Right.
which would not be a good conversation.
Yeah, I can.
So
You're younger than me. I used to be like that. I definitely when I was younger. I'm a bit older than you, I think. I'm past all that. But so what are your top tips for folks who want to quit or cut back?
I think the biggest thing is to do some reflection and what is drinking doing for you
Right.
or not doing for you, right?
Right. Right.
And then also doing a little bit of research about alcohol, just look
Yep.
up some facts. Annie Grace has really good
The
information.
Naked Mind. Yes, the Naked
Naked
Mind. Yep.
Mind.
She's
Yep.
great.
The Huberman Lab podcast
Yep.
is also very helpful. And just listening to other sober curious podcasts, I think, and just hearing other people and seeing if you resonate with things that they're saying, or even if you
Right.
just can pull one little piece out of there. And following, like finding sober people, if you're, on Instagram or Facebook, following people that are
Right.
sober or sober curious,
Yep.
or alcohol free or booze free or spirit free, whichever, and you don't have to identify yourself. I don't
Right.
think I already had talked about this, but you do not need to identify yourself. You do
Right.
not need to say, I am Michelle, I'm an alcoholic, I'm this, I'm that. No, like
Right.
you choose what you want. Like if I'm
Yep.
just Michelle and I'm not drinking, then that's what I am.
Yep.
There's no need to have any kind of labels. My only
Right.
label is my name.
Right,
Okay.
right. Well, I really like that approach from Annie Grace with the Naked Mind, where she will not use the word alcoholic. It's like it's not in use in healthcare anymore. They use alcohol use disorder.
Disorder, yes.
Yeah, and just her framework where you need to get rid of cognitive dissonance first. So you don't want to have that voice that's punishing you and beating you up every
Correct.
time you drink. And then there's the other voice, which is like, come on, it's only one. You had a hard day, like that voice over there. But then identifying like who's the real me. It's
Absolutely.
not like the meanie over here or the sort of tempter over here. It's like, who's me? And I get to make my decisions. And then reprogramming, rewiring your neural circuits by informing yourself about what alcohol is really doing. Like question why you're doing it and then get the information about what it's actually doing as you go. And I think that I think that's pretty powerful when you start, when you start to really think about, gosh, is this worth it?
Right, right. And if you're a
Yeah.
science person, or even if you're not, I'm an educator, and we talked about this the other day, data, data, data.
Yep.
You
Get
need
the
to have
info
data,
to make an
right?
informed choice.
I
Like,
need
because
the
I was like,
numbers, right,
yeah, for years drinking red wine, thinking it was good for me, but dude,
right, right, right.
right? Like,
And now,
what a
it's
dummy.
kind
But
of
I mean,
like,
I was happy to hear, like, it was a message that went over really easily with me. It was like, awesome, it's good for me. Yay. But, I wasn't really questioning very deeply. But, after the pandemic, I was like, okay, no, this isn't good. I don't like the fact that I got to the liquor store and it was closed and it was like, oh no, like just that feeling. I was like, oh,
oh yeah, it
I don't
feels
like that.
awful.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, that's not good. So then you have to start examining it, for sure. And it's not even like that you're have an addictive personality or that you have a weakness or anything else. It's literally the nature of the substance. It's addictive.
Mhm. I
I mean,
also
some
just,
people are more addictive than others. Like it depends on your levels of a certain enzyme. I can't remember what the enzyme is, but there are different levels, and some people are way more susceptible than others.
oh
But
yes,
no one's immune.
right,
No one
right.
is immune, right? Nobody. So
I think the other thing too, just to add, I think we already said this, but listening to yourself, right? Like
yes,
listening to that voice inside of you, but giving yourself grace. Like this is very hard. It is
yes,
something that you've been doing over and over again for maybe 5 years or 10 years or 20 years or 30 or
30
40,
years, 40 years. Yep.
right? So you have
Yep.
to give yourself grace, and we slowly are finding the things that are going to help us get to that other side, and I promise you will get there. I mean, for the amount of time I struggled, I couldn't get past a week for a very long time until I found those podcasts and those sober communities and accountability, having other people. That's why Dry January also is so important in Sober October, because you're usually in a community. You're with
Right.
other people that are dealing with the same thing,
Right. Right.
and you're
And
not alone.
And then, for some people, like some people have that kind of mindset to go and figure it out themselves, but not everyone, that might not be successful for everyone, or they may have been trying that and not finding that they're reaching their goals in terms of cutting drinking out or back. So, why is coaching and what does coaching offer, like a service like you offer as a sobriety coach? Why is
Sure,
that
sure.
important for some people and who should consider it?
I think that anybody that is feeling something that's resonating with them that they're hearing in this podcast, if you're feeling alone, if you're not sure where else to turn, with coaching, what I do is it's a one-to-one experience.
Right.
So it's you and I, it's no one else, and I'm not chasing you, right? So, you book a discovery call with me. That's how it all starts. It's free. We have a chat and we just say, like, is this going to work for me? Let me hear a little bit about your story. And then we go from there. And then I have a few different packages. So we can do an hour, 4 hours, 8 hours, or 12 hours, but it's broken up over time. I have
Yes.
clients that I had in August. I still have them that are still working on that 8 hours because it's on their time, right? First activity is the wheel of life. And that's kind of where we take a look at how alcohol is affecting you, and we kind of pull it back and we go little baby steps at a time. So it's
Right.
not overwhelming. It's not like a super fast, quick fix. And me sharing my experiences, that is one of my favorite parts,
I
because
bet.
it is,
Yeah.
you are working together with me. I'm sharing my experiences with you. You're sharing stories with me. I can relate to almost probably everything you're saying.
Right.
And it's more intimate and private, right? And especially right now, if you want to join someone on your journey, right? I've been you. I can't believe that I'm sitting on the other side of the computer
Right.
years later. Like I can't, and non-judgment. There is no judgment. There is no
Right.
shame. Like
No
that's the
shame.
other thing.
No
You can
shame. Yeah.
say whatever you want, and I will not judge you. I will not I will not shame you. It's just you sharing your struggles and me helping you and guiding you.
Right. And then there's that accountability of someone that
Yes.
it's not just on you and
Exactly.
yeah,
And
yeah,
growth mindset. And I'm
growth
staying
mindset.
positive. And we're going to talk about, okay, this happened. Okay, well now what can we do next time? What jewels do you have in your jewelry box? Let's make a list. What's working for you? What's not working for you? Okay, this is really great. You know, these little step by steps to give you encouragement and feedback. As an educator, it's what I do all day long. So
Right.
I'm
Yes.
differentiating, right? I'm doing with what, if you are a client, Melanie, with what I give to you is going to be different for, you know, somebody named Billy. You know, I'm going to be adjusting what I do to work for you.
Right. Right. Gotcha. Cool, man.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, this is great. We should probably wrap up. We've been 45 minutes. So I
Okay.
do want to let people know how they can reach you though. So,
Yeah,
and I will put
sure.
this also, like I'll go back and I'll update the post to put this stuff in text, but anyone listening, you can find Michelle at Sober Virgo Woman on Instagram, Facebook, and you can email her at sobervirgowoman@gmail.com. She is working on a really cool freebie. Is it going to be 100 things to say when people ask you why you're not drinking?
It's going to be 103 things to
103
say when
things.
you're not drinking. So
Right.
when people
The
ask
only drug
you,
that we have to justify not taking, right? Like
I know.
it's so funny, right?
Well,
It's like, how come you haven't quit? Hey, how come you're not drinking? It's sort of like
how come
it's
you're not eating mayonnaise?
how come right? Like it's strange, isn't it? That people feel like they can say, "Oh, really?" And everyone wants you to drink with them.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. But there are so many people that also don't want to drink. There's so many other things that you can do, and I promise you it's out there. So these are the things that you can say when people ask you why you don't drink. I will give you three little cheats. So one thing you can say when people ask you why you don't drink, because I get crazy. I prefer waking up without a hangover, and I have to drive. So just those three simple things. There's so many things that you can
Oh my
say.
gosh, yeah. I'm running a marathon in the morning.
Yes, I will say that this definitely applies towards the beginning of sobriety. Now I'm just like, oh my God, are you kidding? I love being sober. Like
Yeah,
now I'm confident enough I could say it.
right.
However, for a very long time I needed a list. And
Right, right. Well, it is like a social glue. I think that's one of the big reasons people do drink is because it does break down inhibitions in social situations. People feel like that they are more animated and they're not as shy and they can connect with people better. So that's, I think, how people get kind of sucked into it, especially when we're young, like in university and stuff. It's kind of like to help the kids kind of feel like, well, kids, you know, people 19, 20, whatever. It's kind of like this seems to help them get over their shyness or whatever. But so much more helpful just to develop social skills, right?
yes, and that's the thing. Like, I love that you just brought that up, is because that's how a lot of us started in high school and in college. We started
Totally.
drinking, and it was the quote unquote cool thing to do.
It was totally the cool thing to do. It was the only thing to do.
That's right. That was a part of it too.
It
Absolutely.
was. It was just like, are you part of this or are you an outcast?
Yes,
So, yeah,
yes. And you are definitely not an outcast if you don't drink. I promise you, because that's exactly what I thought was going to happen. And everything in the opposite direction has
right. You've
happened.
got a whole new community of friends now, and you're just kind of blossoming. I can tell you're
Yes,
so vibrant. You're obviously having a blast. I love your
I am.
Instagram. I love your Instagram. I love watching you walking around New York City, talking to
Oh, thank
people,
you.
and it's really fun. And thank you. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for
Oh my
joining us
gosh, thank you
tonight,
for this
Michelle.
opportunity. I'm so
Oh,
glad. Thank you, everyone that's listening. And if there's a little baby part of you that resonated with something, please come hang out with us. Follow me, follow Melanie, share it with your friends. Let them know,
yeah,
because you are not alone.
you're not alone. You have a wellness team.
Absolutely.
So thanks for tuning in, and please feel free to share your thoughts about this episode in the comments and share it with your friends who are also looking to improve their health and vitality in 2024. I also invite you to download my free guide, which is about how to foster and illuminate your own energy to lift yourself up. It's a simple visual guide you can print and post on your fridge to remind you of the different ways that you can cultivate better energy in yourself. And you will find the link below the video in the comments. So don't
And my
forget.
link tree is in there too, right?
And her link tree, yes,
My
Michelle's
link
link
tree
tree
just
will
in
be
case
there.
you don't have Instagram. And if you would like the freebie, comment freebie.
Comment freebie, that's right. And don't forget that you have the power to create meaningful, positive change in your life. It's your power. It's in your choice. And you don't have to do it alone. We have your back. Thanks for watching and see you next week.